A tropical disturbance is expected to bring major flooding to the Gulf Coast this week, and it might even become Tropical Storm Dexter, the next tropical storm of the hurricane season as it moves along the Gulf Coast, dumping a ton of rain. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly what's going on with this storm system, but first, if you're new here, feel free to hit that subscribe button for more tropical weather updates. So right now, here's what the disturbance looks like right now, and you can see pretty much a lot of thunderstorm activity, not just over Florida, but really extending all the way up into southeastern Alabama, the Florida Panhandle, northern Georgia, even a little bit into the Carolinas. And this is the same thing like it was yesterday, with a lot of intense thunderstorms and heavy rainfall over Florida. And now this disturbance continues moving westward, and the center of the storm is probably somewhere over here near Tallahassee or somewhere in northern Florida. But a lot of thunderstorm activity over parts of Florida, but that's actually moving offshore as the disturbance is supposed to move more into the Gulf. And there is a 40% chance of tropical development in the next 2 days and the next 7 days. So a medium chance of this becoming a tropical cyclone as it moves through the Gulf. And actually it's going to end up coming in towards southeastern Louisiana around Thursday. So this has a window of opportunity to become something. Also, here's a look at the radar showing. You can see that there's a lot of rain offshore now. A lot of that heavy rain is definitely moving offshore, but there was a lot of rain yesterday over Florida and even severe thunderstorms and all of that. But this is moving west. Here's a look at the latest track guidance for Invest 93L, and you can see the area of low pressure is over northern Florida, actually a bit further east of Tallahassee, somewhere between Tallahassee and Jacksonville, but the storm is supposed to move offshore. Now, a lot of the guidance keeps it very close to the coast, so that's going to be an important thing to watch, because how far offshore it gets will pretty much determine how likely it is to actually become a tropical cyclone. They're showing that it could have 24 to 36 hours over water before it reaches land once again in the next 48 hours early on Thursday. It'll be moving back on land somewhere in southeastern Louisiana or southwestern Mississippi. And here's the latest intensity guidance, and a lot of the models are not showing development, especially a lot of the global models. They're not showing anything. Some of the other hurricane models are not really showing much intensification, and it's not really even expected to become a tropical storm. Once it's out like past 5 days, it's probably not even a tropical system, even if the winds get stronger. But there's a couple models showing it could, within the next 24 to 48 hours, become a weak tropical storm. If it gets named, it's going to be Tropical Storm Dexter. Here's a look at the HAFS A model, and this is actually pretty interesting, because notice it stays disorganized even going into tomorrow, early Wednesday morning. Pretty much a disorganized storm, but you do have an area of low pressure that's definitely there. But the rain and thunderstorm activity is disorganized, but then this heads towards Louisiana, and once it does that, once we're going into early on Thursday, it does look like it's turning into a tropical storm, and could reach maybe a peak intensity. They're showing 999 millibars, so potentially going below 1,000 millibars, potentially a low-end tropical storm going into southeastern Louisiana sometime during the day on Thursday, but then it stalls out. And if that happens, it's going to be dropping a ton of rainfall over this area, and it will be, and that's bringing in a big risk for flooding along the Gulf Coast. And it was still over southeastern Louisiana, even going into Thursday evening, Thursday night, and this slowly moves onshore, but it's still an organized storm system. So this is definitely something to watch, and it still brings rain into the south, even going into the end of the week. We're looking at not really strong winds until we get closer to Wednesday night into Thursday. You have winds are apparently going to be potentially 45, even 50 miles an hour just before it moves onshore into Louisiana. And tropical storm force winds continue throughout the day across a small section of the coast, according to the half-say model. So it could turn into a tropical system. A lot of the global models don't really show any development, but it definitely looks possible. And for example, the moisture is definitely there. The moisture is not going to be a problem. It isn't right now, and it's not going to be. It's producing a lot of thunderstorm activity, a lot of rain. It just depends on how quickly it's able to organize into a tropical storm. And something that could prevent that is going to be the wind shear, of course. Looking at that, we have the sounding showing that, yeah, the wind shear could be a problem. Potentially up to 20 knots of wind shear. That's very unfavorable for organization, and that's tomorrow. The shear is definitely going to be a problem, and as it gets closer to Louisiana, could be in a lighter shear environment with potentially 12 knots of wind shear. But notice the moisture is always there. The shear is what's the problem. There is an upper level trough to the southwest of where this disturbance is, and so you do have a high pressure ridge that would produce a more favorable outflow and less shear in the middle of it. But the only problem is that you have this trough right here, and that's bringing in some more wind shear, and even the way the ridge is placed over this system, there's still going to be some shear. That's going to be a problem, but it is going over some very favorable sea surface temperatures in the mid 80s, 86, 87 degrees, potentially in some places almost 90 degrees, especially over off the coast of Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. This part of the Gulf is the warmest part of the Gulf. That is favorable as it goes this way. Now, the rain is definitely going to be a big problem. So let's take a look at the total accumulated rainfall over the next couple days. And you can see that, yeah, it's going to be a lot of rain for, starting in Florida, additional 2 to 5 inches of rain potentially in some places. And it's going to vary a lot because these thunderstorms are going to bring in a lot of heavy rain. You can have localized accumulations that are going to be way higher than what the general forecast is. So you can have some places seeing localized amounts over a foot of rain. Even near Ocala, you could see 13 inches of rain in some of the heavier thunderstorms potentially, but in general, areas seeing 1 to 2, maybe 2 to 4 inches of rain in a lot of places, but some areas are seeing over 6 to 10 inches of rain across northern and central Florida, and then even going towards the Panhandle, some areas are seeing 6 to 8 inches of rain, and that's going to produce a big risk for flooding. And even as you go further west, even southern Mississippi seeing more so in the 1 to 2 inch range of rainfall, southern Alabama seeing more of the same thing, except for localized accumulations potentially over 5 to 6 inches of rain. Then Louisiana is where they're going to be seeing a lot of rain. They're showing New Orleans could see 2 to 4 inches of rain. Areas further to the southeast, closer to where this storm could potentially make landfall, seeing 6 to 10 inches of rain. So that's going to be a problem. And then see some of these localized accumulations. Now, this is going to be random where this happens, but you could see somewhere in southeastern Louisiana, you could see over a foot of rain from some of these showers and thunderstorms moving across the area. And this is just over the next 2 days, basically going all the way through Thursday night. So there could be even more rain across this region that's not shown here. This is going to be a big risk of flooding. Here's the day 1 excessive rainfall outlook, showing a slight risk of flooding over parts of Florida, including Tampa, Orlando, Ocala, and surrounding areas, even Lakeland, Florida. Going all the way up towards the Big Bend of Florida, including like Cedar Key, they're all under a slight risk of flash flooding. Surrounding areas under a marginal risk that extends all the way up into the south and the mid-Atlantic, with even a moderate risk of flash flooding, but that's not totally related to this tropical disturbance. The day 2 excessive rainfall outlook shows a big marginal risk of flash flooding going all the way from Lafayette, Louisiana, Baton Rouge, all the way across the Gulf Coast, all the way down into South Florida. The day 3 excessive rainfall outlook shifts it a little bit westward, but brings in a big slight risk of excessive rainfall across southern parts of Louisiana and the southern coastline of Mississippi and a little bit of Alabama. That's the day 3 outlook. And then notice this, the day 4 outlook is where things could get really bad. And this is Friday going into Saturday. So just the rainfall that's happening over the next couple days is not the big problem. There's a moderate risk of flash flooding across the Lake Charles area, Alexandria, Baton Rouge, Lafayette. So this is a pretty big risk for flooding, and this is for day 4. So this could even get upgraded further as we get closer to it. And then a big slight risk extending all the way into southeastern Texas and Mississippi. The day 5 excessive rainfall outlook shows more flooding over the same area, centered on Louisiana, with all this heavy rain expected even continuing into Saturday and Sunday. So whether or not this actually turns into a tropical system technically doesn't really matter. It's like the rain is going to be a massive problem, especially as it leads to significant flooding. Now, this does have the potential to turn into a tropical system, but it may or may not. The MJO is not so favorable for that. So here's the update on the MJO, showing very unfavorable, of course, across the Atlantic. That's why we're not really seeing a ton of tropical storm activity. That's one of several reasons. Going into July 20th, July 25th, slightly favorable for parts of the Western Atlantic, and then potentially getting more favorable as we go into August for tropical activity. Here's just an overview of the Atlantic. We have our tropical storm system that the GFS does not really do much of anything with over the Gulf Coast. And then after that, really the main development region is still pretty quiet. And then you do have some tropical waves, some moisture flowing through, but nothing really turning into a big tropical system, especially the intertropical convergence zone is still pretty far south. It's not even in the main development region yet. Then we still have to watch, off the east coast of the U.S., possibly in the Gulf, for potential storms off of a frontal system or something like that. But still, all these storm systems moving through, bringing in a lot of rain. Here's what it looks like across the U.S. Heavy rain moving across the Midwest, across the South, across the East Coast, even parts of the Southwest seeing heavy rain coming in, and that's going to continue for the next couple weeks, all the way to the end of the month, apparently. And that's going to add up to a lot of rain. Here's a look at just the total rainfall of the next 16 days, looking at 2 to 4 inches of rain at least for the Midwest, and the South seeing several inches of rain, same 2 to 4 inches, but localized amounts well over that. And then, of course, the Mid-Atlantic seeing the same thing. That's where you're seeing a lot of that rain throughout this region. And then even the Southwest, some areas seeing 2 to 4, even 3 to 5 inches of rain in some of the heavier thunderstorms that are going to be happening there. So, and then the West Coast really not seeing anything. But, definitely the next several days are going to be very important to watch, especially along the Gulf Coast with this potential tropical system, but also just bringing in all that heavy rain and a big risk for flooding. Thanks for watching this video. If you liked this video, please be sure to hit the like button. If you haven't already, share the video and make sure you hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications for more weather updates on the tropics. Thanks for watching. Extreme Weather Zone, out.